Jack Kirby had a fascination with stories about pantheons of gods, as we saw in Thor and the New Gods. That fascination appears again in The Eternals, which Emmet and I have been reading through here on the show. This week we discuss issues 9 through 12, issues which feature an awful lot of characters judging books by their covers. Is Karkas a killing machine because he's a big red rock creature? Is the Reject a hope for the future of the Deviants simply because he's conventionally handsome? Stay tuned. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for helping to keep the show going. You can pitch in by pledging at least $2 a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
This is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Emmet in country Victoria, Australia, where the thing you just stepped in, a kangaroo's responsible for it.
Yeah. The thing you just stepped in. Yes, exactly. Unless I've been around with a little plastic baggie picking it up, which I do. I do. Yeah. Clean up the do.
So we are actually back. So during my summer vacation from school, I also basically took a summer vacation from the show and mostly did reruns because I've had a lot of other projects going on. And I still don't think we're going to be a new show every week, especially since Kumar is not available until at least October. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I thought we should get back on the Eternals train here.
Yeah. And I think I messaged you during the week because I read our selection of issues for this episode. And I was like, oh, things are moving along.
Yeah.
the plot's happening.
Yeah, it's issues 9 through 12, and there's a lot happening. But every time I come back and read this book again, the first thing I do is compare it to the movie. And we're going to have to talk about the movie when we finish Kirby's series here.
Yeah, I think I will actually sit down and watch it again. It's a movie that I've largely expunged from my brain. And it's a cursed movie as well, because it also features an off-screen cameo from Blade.
Right.
Who I don't think we're ever going to actually see that version of Blade. I think that version of Blade's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think the directors quit or something. And
multiple directors have quit. Multiple.
Yeah. And it keeps getting pushed back on the schedule. It's supposed to be out by now, I'm sure. But
oh, yes.
It's not even all shot yet.
No, it's not been shot. I don't think they've done anything because they keep arguing about the script. And it looks like there's a bunch of jockeying for like who's in the right, who's in the wrong happening. I don't think it's going to happen. And you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine yet?
I'm not sure I'm going to.
Oh, it's Tim. I mean, it's fun. It's pretty fun.
Well, but, the other problem with that is that I heard that it references a lot of the Fox Marvel movies that I've never seen. So there's going to be a lot of nostalgia for something that I have no experience with. Absolutely
true. And what I was going to say, without any spoilers, what I was going to say was that Deadpool, being a character who's aware of the fact that he's a comic book character and a movie character, actually does comment on a lot of the sort of missed projects or projects that haven't been made yet and things like that. Like, he's actually referring to it. And yeah, there's some sort of talk about the behind the scenes shenanigans at Marvel Studios at the moment, and it's briefly touched on. What I was just talking about.
And as far as Eternals movie being cursed, I mean, it also teased the second Eternals movie, which apparently is not going to happen. I don't see it on the schedule anymore.
It's not going to happen. And we're not going to see Harry Styles as Star Fox. We saw him as Star Fox, but that's it. That's what we're going to get.
For like 30 seconds.
Yeah. I can live with that. Bullet dodged.
But I keep coming back to how many characters there were in the movie. So, there were 10 Eternals in the movie, which on the one hand, in the comics, there are actually a lot more Eternals than that.
Yeah, there's different houses.
But on the other hand, we really only focus on maybe 4 of them.
Yep.
I mean, like, to the, most the people we see the most are Icarus, Makari, Cersei, and Thena, and the others are basically supporting characters. I mean, in this bunch of issues, we meet Sprite and Kingo, who are really minor, at least so far. I don't know, maybe in the later issues they get involved more, but I kind of am doubting it at this point. So what was the point of including them in the movie?
They do get presented in bigger roles as the series progresses, and then there's been other Eternals books since, without Jack Kirby, which have used them as well.
True.
So we can get into that, but I think the premise of the movie, you're right, is that there's this select number of characters, and they're the Eternals. And then these issues that we're about to talk about, it's like, no, there's actually hundreds of them.
Right.
There's so many.
And also, in this comic anyway, the Eternals are not superheroes. They have some powers, but it's not a traditional superhero setup at all.
Mm-hmm. They're gods. They're gods. They're basically the pantheons.
In the movie, I mean, going into it with no experience with any of the Eternals comics, I felt like, oh, it's a superhero movie with just superheroes I don't know anything about, but they're not superheroes in the comics.
Yeah, it's funny just thinking about the movie again, because the movie starts with this sort of elevation of man by the Eternals, and it's so reminiscent to me because there are like clear allusions to Stanley Kubrick's 2001. Mm-hmm. It's so reminiscent to me of Jack Kirby's 2001 comics as well, which we've also talked about in this set. And that those comics preceded this. And I feel as if we're tracking Jack Kirby's thoughts around this idea as we progress from the Fourth World back into his return to Marvel, into the Eternals. And the movie, I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, sort of also visited that same concept, the elevation of humanity, and what this means, and theory of artificially induced evolution and charts of the gods. But it's just such a smaller canvas that the movie plays with, whereas here you've got all sorts of interesting ideas. Like, Thena is much more interesting in the comics than she is in the movie.
Yes.
Like, in the movie, they made her like borderline. She has some sort of locked-in syndrome. Whereas in the comics, she's one of the Eternals who's a little more open to the Deviants, and she's more sort of interested in what's going on. Mm-hmm. And Kieran Gillen does this in his Eternals book as well. Like, she's more interested in the Deviants than the other characters are. And I think that would have been a very interesting plot to develop in the movie. I think there could have been quite a lot of plot sort of advanced through that storyline, but we didn't get to that at all. And the villain, the version of the Deviants,
Crow,
Crow that we see in the movie, is just like generic bad guy.
Yeah.
You know? Huge missed opportunity again, which I think I said before.
Yeah.
Repeating myself now.
So issue 9. So we see Karkas here front and center. The reject, or also later known as Ransack, is shooting at him, and there are other people around. Some are shooting at him or getting ready to. Some are like on the ground or whatever. Oh, and we see Thena here in the foreground, her back as she's reaching in. He can't be controlled. He can't be stopped. He's the killing machine. Which isn't necessarily true, but
it's not true.
We'll find.
Did it get you
out.
to open that comic book, kids? Maybe it worked.
All right, so first page we see Icarus, Makari, and Margot. Icarus is flying. The other two are in some kind of little open plane with no top. And they're going to Olympia, and they're met by some kind of flying dragon creature.
This is our interior splash page action sequence that Kirby's been doing.
Yeah.
Second and third page. Let's start off with a bang, and it's quite a spectacular splash.
Yeah. And Icarus is fighting it and just turns into a worse monster. And they figure out that Sprite is causing these monsters to appear. And Sprite, I mean, he's an Eternal. He's quite old too, of course, but he's, I guess, younger than the others. I mean, he's more childlike anyway.
He has the appearance of a child, and he sort of takes that aspect on where he's mischievous, and everyone's like, "Oh, you must discipline him. You must discipline him." And you got to the point where I was like, "Am I reading like a spanking fetish comic?"
Yeah, well, a spanking does happen a little later.
It does happen, and they're all discipline him, discipline him. Oh my god, what have I strayed into?
Yeah, it was kind of odd, kind of awkward. Yeah, I hope he's caught and punished, someone says. And so meanwhile, what's Zuras with the red hair? He's talking with Domo.
Domo, yeah. We have these sort of cutaways to all these different events around the world.
So they're talking about the space gods, the Celestials.
And I was very pleased to see that Australia gets featured here. It's a bit, I would say, unusual because it's a bunch of lads in the bush, and they've encountered a Celestial, and they're all white men, and they're on horseback, and that's him, lads. What do you think of my wild story now? Stay clear of him. He's an outer spacer for certain. A dingo UFO. And I was like, a dingo UFO?
Yeah, I've never heard dingo used as an adjective. I know it's a wild dog, but...
Yeah, they've got dingoes out here, but it's just... Yeah. It's where I sent a picture of a kangaroo in my back garden to some relations of mine. And one of them replied in a sort of an Australianism, an attempted Australianism, with "It's a bloody galah," and I was like, "No, that's a bird. A galah's a bird." But there's Australian words that other people from overseas just assume are interchangeable, I think. And here we have dingo as a adjective. Just odd.
Yeah, so we've got some Soviet generals who are looking at a picture of a Celestial, and we'll come back to them in another issue. Of course, they're freaking out. And what's this third one? So, in the Swiss Alps, and some mountain climbers are encountering a Celestial. And then Miami Beach, where in this panel we just see people staring at the Celestial, who is in a full page panel on the next page.
It leads into it. It does lead into it. Right. But it is funny just looking at these comics sometimes, and we do see more diversity among the ranks of the Eternals eventually within this comic, but it's just there's all these sort of glimpses of all these countries in the world, and it's like white people, white people, white people, white people.
Yeah, we don't visit Africa. We don't see any Australian Aboriginal people. We don't see China or Japan
or even Miami Beach. Miami, known for being very diverse. Lots of different communities.
But yeah, everybody on the beach is white.
And it's just sometimes you look back at these comics and go, you could have been a little more interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the time I think it was just unconscious bias, but probably for me, because I came up from a place where there were black people, but not all that many of them. In my school, we had one black kid. Not much diversity. Anyway, So, yeah, people are reacting to the Celestials in various places. And then we see a ship going to Lemuria. Who is on this ship?
Well, it's not. It's a. We've got a craft entering Lemuria. Celestial has descended towards Lemuria, and I believe the craft was just an example of a deviant craft. It's just another.
It doesn't seem to be important who's on it.
It's just showing you that there are it is a civilization still with deviants coming and going and traveling from Lemuria, which I think is the significance of it. It's almost like a movie sequence. This page is like a movie sequence. It's sort of a tracking shot of the Celestial descending down below, and then we encounter a craft, and that craft leads us into Lemuria, and then we have within Lemuria in the sort of entertainment quarter where the royal family are watching this sort of Colosseum style violence. So I feel like Kirby's camera is sort of leading us down, and then within, and that's the sort of progress.
Yeah, just following a ship to show us where we're going now.
Yeah.
And we're back at Toad's place where the battle between Karkas and the Reject is starting.
And now all of a sudden you have this explosion of color. Because you've got all the deviants, and you've got all the different kinds of deviants, and you've got all the costuming, and they all there's suddenly this life to this page. Whereas the previous page, there's this sort of green and blues and yellows.
Yeah, and the whole previous spread, really. Yeah, even the one with the Celestial in it, it's not a very bright red on the Celestial, and the rest of the colors are kind of ocean colors.
Yeah, it's interesting style. Like, it's interesting use of color, use of contrast, and then just this emphasis on water. And then once we gain with our access to the arena space, explosion of life.
Yeah, lots of bright reds.
Yeah, and I just think that's it's like when you watch those nature documentaries and they reveal some sort of deep undersea creature that has this little cave and it has bioluminescence. It's suddenly like, ooh, life, and that's what this sequence sort of establishes as well. It's a really interesting choice that's been made. It didn't really jump out at me until we were going through these pages.
So, and Thena's not happy with what's going on. She doesn't like this. And especially because she sees that this match is not fair. I guess because Karkas is so much bigger than the Reject. So nobody's expecting the Reject to win. And from this point, I mean, in all these issues, I think there's an awful lot of judging books by their covers. Yeah. He's a monster, so he must be mean and vicious, as the cover told us, a killing machine. And the Reject is handsome and looks like a human, so he must be all right. Yeah.
which is not the case at all.
Right, yeah, it's more reversal of that, because the Deviant is much closer to being a killing machine than Karkas is. And
Karkas is also a deviant, but the Reject is a deviance that the deviants themselves are disgusted by. They're like, no.
Right. And Thena keeps saying, finally you've got a good-looking variant. You should be happy about this.
It's rough. It gets worse later on. But yeah, it is rough. But you're right. I think that's the point that he's trying to make his point here. And we had a very similar character in the Fourth World Saga. We had the Bug character who was, he looked like a bug. He had the bug type armor on, but then when he took his mask off, oh no, he's actually attractive.
Yeah.
So you do get the sense of Kirby sort of taking some work that had already been done or he'd already been drafting and then just swapping out the names, just saying, all right, this is this new character now, picking up that same thread, if you like. That this is another example of the Eternals is the new gods that the serial numbers filed off a bit.
Yeah. So, yeah, the Reject has this gun that he's shooting at Karkas and injuring him. And Karkas yells at him, "You're like them. You hurt Karkas. Why?" And everybody's surprised because they didn't think Karkas could talk or even think. That monstrous mutate can think and talk. So they thought it was just a mindless monster that just kind of killed automatically, but not at all. He seems to be kind of erudite, really.
Yeah, he's a poet, and he has the body of a monster, but even the Deviants treat him like a monster and an animal. And there is, as you said, a very sledgehammer subtle allegory being made here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am interested in Karkas, and Karkas has an attitude I find very entertaining where he's sort of, this is not the end of him, we'll see him again, but he's sort of a very wry character. And I enjoy that.
Yeah. So the Reject beats Karkas and then just can't stop being violent. And he starts attacking the other Deviants. And we have just a big fight scene here for several pages. And he grabs a gun, he's shooting at a bunch of the other Deviants, and they're trying to bring him down, and they can't. And finally, he's approached Toad's sort of box seating where Thena and Crow are. It was a little fuzzy from the narration, but I gathered that there was kind of a force field around the box.
Yes, he's protecting them from the combatants. Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, even in the Colosseum, they were elevated above the area, I believe. And here they're right next to the action, but there's a sort of protective bubble.
Yeah. And Toad orders that the Deviant should be put down. Crow is going to take care of it. And then there's like a big earthquake because the Celestial has arrived. This is Isan. And so that takes priority, and they're shooting at the at Isan to no avail. And he drains all of their weapon systems, all their power, which means that the force field is gone. And as the issue ends, the Reject is getting ready to attack the people in the box.
Yeah. We're going to get into it next issue as well, but the title of the next issue is T-East on the final page, which is it's rendered here as mother, But in the next issue, we will suddenly inherit a exclamation mark, and it'll become mother, and, which there was that movie that came out a couple of years ago, and a lot of film reviewers just enjoyed saying mother. They were reviewing it on podcasts and stuff. Well, that's what this next issue is titled. But yeah, the sort of little digression into the Deviant Society. I think I read this issue in the past few days for this conversation, and I just had this moment of, oh, this is getting interesting again. Like, there was a sort of lull in the first couple of issues of Eternals, and now I feel the sort of momentum has sort of picked up again. And it's because we're visiting this other society, which is being depicted with a little bit of nuance. They are evil. They are doing evil things. But then within that society, there's also characters like Crow who seem to have a broader perspective. And then you've got the Reject, and it's like, yes, he's somebody who's been tortured and abused, and he's he looks like he's a victim, but he's also now he's gone so far. He's just a killing machine. He just wants to kill everything. So it's like a wild animal, and you do not want to be near him. and Dina is now in this position where she's going, "Oh, he's so beautiful. I want to do something." No, Crow's like, "No, he will kill you. He's really dangerous."
Yeah. Right. So issue 10, dated April 1977, by the way. And we see the huge hand of Isan takes up most of the illustration portion of the cover, coming out of the ocean towards Lemuria. And we see some Deviants and Thena with Crow in the foreground. As the city seems to be being destroyed here. Water is pouring into the city. And indeed, on the first page, we see kind of the same thing from a different angle, with Isan's hand reaching in from the left and crushing a lot of machinery and stuff. He's crushed our outer weapon system with his mighty hand. Abandon this perimeter. And then the big splash on pages 2 and 3, we see Isan's head and shoulders, and they're shooting at him. Makes no difference. And other deviants are around freaking out. I had to wonder, why did Kirby make the Celestials so inscrutable? They don't talk. We don't see their faces. It's mentioned later that they're wearing helmets, which was a good clarification because I wasn't sure they weren't robots or some other kind of creature, but apparently they are humanoid, I guess. But I mean, I've struggled with them a little bit because I don't know. I guess I was expecting a little bit more characterization or getting to know them a little better, but it's just not possible. Maybe that's the point, but they feel kind of distant and kind of hard to grasp.
Yeah, they're unknowable. The Next Wave comic book, which was sort of a maxi series that came out in the aughts, introduces a sort of comedic version of the Celestials, where they tell Machine Man that he's just the absolute worst. Like, Machine Man's with them, and they're like, "We hate you so much. You are just a real pain." You know, they say a lot of words that are bleeped out in the actual comic book dialogue. So they're given a bit of a personality there. For comedic effect. But yes, typically they are unknowable, unapproachable, working to some goal that we can't comprehend. They are currently, in this comic book, they are working to a 50-year timescale. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's, again, meant to show that for them, that's probably not a lot of time. For us, that's like, geez, that's 50 years. Right?
Yeah.
You know. That's more than a lot of people will live to the end of that time in this story, but we don't really see that play out over the course of Marvel. Whenever the Celestials arrive, it's always like an immediate threat. It's sort of interesting how they are at such a remove from us, and then I find the stories where writers try to actually get over that hump not entirely satisfying. I like that they're unknowable, personally. You know, that sort of adds a mythic quality that they have. It's an interesting concept.
Okay, so yeah, we get a couple more pages of, well, they're trying to fight off the Celestial. Going back to the movie,
yes, okay.
We had one Celestial who was dead.
Right.
No other Celestials that I can recall?
Was the Celestial dead, or was the Celestial stillborn? Wasn't that the idea that the planet itself was a
kind of the
birthing
egg
ground?
Yeah.
It was an egg for a Celestial.
That's right.
And then they managed to prevent it from, like, hatching.
That's right.
And So I don't know if it's dead, more sort of paused, sleeping
Yeah.
almost.
But it's just interesting to me that they didn't keep the Celestials more like they are here.
Yes, I think it's somewhat misconceived. Pardon the pun. The actual overall approach, because but then you're entering into the space that you were just having trouble with, which is you've got these creatures that are unknowable, unapproachable. How do you write a story about them? Kirby gave it a go. Whereas the filmmakers, I wonder if they were just going, well, okay, the planet Earth is an egg, and the Eternals are there to ensure that the egg hatches, and that's it. That's the premise.
So we see the city's been flooded here. And of course, Toad and the royal family are the priority. I mean, it's the deviants, like every man for himself, basically.
Mhm.
And the government doesn't really care about you. They're saving themselves, too.
Not relatable at all.
No, no, no. How could that ever happen in real life?
Can't imagine it happening.
And then we see celestials in other locations, in the Alps, and yeah, in Australia again, in white people places,
Hmm.
in the Siberian wilderness. This is the Soviet Union one, and then back to Zurus and Domo, and Zurus has put on some kind of a helmet, and he's trying to reach out to the Celestials vessel that's in orbit, and then it's kind of shocks him. He's saying, no, no, no. And Domo says that the link up is under siege by an incredible mind thrust. So whatever was coming from the ship just kind of overloaded even Zuras, who of course is basically Zeus.
Hmm.
But then Zura says, "It's done, Domo. I have no further need for the link up." So did he gain some knowledge?
Well, yeah, he's encountered this mind that is much more powerful than his, the one above all. And yes, there's this sense of okay, this is the scope of the situation. Now I understand what we're up against. I think that's more. He's
Yeah.
confirmed
Okay.
what is there. And yeah, he hands it over. I'm rereading Lord of the Rings now for God, I don't know how many times have I read that in my lifetime. Many times, Tim, many times. It's like an old blanket I like to wrap myself around in. Um, but in Lord of the Rings, you got the idea of the Palantir, and the Palantir is a seeing stone. It lets the characters see something from a great distance, and one of the Palantirs is held by the enemy. So when the hero or I think at one point a sort of compromised character. I don't want to spoil it for you. Haven't read it, Tim. Picks up the Palantir and then is confronted by the enemy, and there's this sort of mental assault that happens because they see you too, and that's what this scene kind of reminds me of. This is this moment of, oh no, you thought you could see, well, they can see you, and they know who you are, and you've been put in your place.
Hmm.
And Zurus, as you say, like, this is the Zeus analog, this is the king of the gods, this is the leader of the Eternals, and he's just run into a wall in effect. Oh crap, this thing's bigger than me. All right, I'll step away. That's more or less what this is.
Yeah, so he understands what the Celestials' mission is now, this 50-year judgment.
Yep.
And in response, he says, activate the unifier, which is some kind of a machine. It's been silent since the days of the Great Flood. Woe to man that it must sound again. So I guess basically it's a calling device, right? It calls out
Hmm.
to all of the Eternals around the world to gather at Olympia.
Yeah, and we're going to spend the next couple of issues sort of building up to what this means, and ultimately what subsequent writing teams will come back to is this idea of the Eternals have this gestalt connection, where they can all become unified, unimind, all the rest of it. We saw this in the Fourth World books as well, but the Forever people had a similar, let's all come together, let's become one entity, and I feel, was it Infinite Man? The Infinite Man? Wasn't that what they sort of became? So Kirby's sort of bringing this idea back, but in this context, it's a way for the Eternals to all, as a community, receive instruction. And that seems to be what it is.
Yeah. And so this reaches Icarus as he is spanking Sprite, and Makari and Margot are there. And I think that's the last we see of Sprite in this set of issues, where he's wagging his fingers and sticking out his tongue as he runs away.
Yeah, he briefly turns into a sort of Gorgon spud-like creature, and he runs off. He looks vaguely like Tintin. He's this sort of... He is Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream. He's this sort of shape-shifting, magical character.
Right. He's literally Puck from... Because Makari says, he's not young in human terms, Margot. One of your writers named Shakespeare included Sprite in one of his plays.
I had forgotten that actually line is in there, but that's exactly, that is delivered. That is absolutely called out. And yes, there is the Neil Gaiman will write an Eternals book later. We don't need to get into the whole Neil Gaiman situation that's playing out right now. But he does this same idea in a very literal one-to-one way. And I find it interesting that Kirby actually touches on the same concept of, no, Midsummer Night's Dream literally happened. But he does it as a glancing aside, and Gaiman sort of spelled it out. Like there was an entire, let's actually have a sequence where we have Midsummer Night's Dream happen, and this is all happening because this character was here and he met this other character, and Kirby's like, that's just an idea, tossed it off, boom, it's a joke. Moving on to the next thing. I love that. That's what I love about Kirby. There's so much richness to his invention that he's just like, he's tossing the ideas aside here, one after the other.
And so now Makari and Icarus are explaining to Margot about the unifier calling all the Eternals. Makari wonders about Thena, who is now among the Deviants. And so, of course, that's leading us to check in on Thena, who's standing there in the box. Everybody else is kind of freaking out, but she's just standing there looking at the reject.
Yeah, they're all freaking out because they're being exposed to the action, and she's like, Brechtian theater. Now the audience is part of the play. Isn't that interesting? And, her line literally is, your combat arena fails to be amusing when it begins to involve the spectators, Crow. And I think that's... I went to as a teenager, I went to a Brecht play in Dublin, and the performers were in front of us, and we were in a sort of a circle around the stage, and the performers were doing their bit, and then all of a sudden this person sitting beside me started yelling. Then it turns out we were surrounded by other performers. They were all in the audience, and they all rushed into and I was like, oh my god, that's sort of what's happening here. Anyway, yes, I think it's great because Crow is trying to point out to Athena that no, this is actually happening now. This is bad. He's going to kill us. Oh no, let's see what happens.
Yeah, so Crow's going to try to hold him off, but that doesn't work either. But then there's a powerful, blinding flash of energy which hurls the two apart. And that's coming from, from the Celestial?
It's coming from Thena. Thena herself.
Oh, from Thena, okay.
Yeah. She's she's the one who's sort of pacifying the situation. I find Thena and Crow just really fascinating. I just find them like really interesting as a pair.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about Crow is totally changed compared to the early issues.
I think he's a performer. I feel he's a performer. He was playing the role of the great Satan for the first couple of issues.
Yeah,
he's
literally.
Like, I love playing the Satan trick on people. This is great fun, And then when he meets Theta, he's like, "Oh, my darling, how are you? So good to see you again." Now he's become this like Byronic romantic hero, and yeah. You keep bringing up the movie. This is where in the movie disappointed me. Crow is so much more interesting as a sort of shape-shifting, complicated, romantic, twisted person. He's got his own moral compass, and it's much more interesting than evil tentacle man.
But yeah, it was Thena. She says that stunned him for certain. He has yet to learn respect for the daughter of great Zurus and for all other life as well.
She has the telltale electrical crackle around her as well. So yeah, just in case we were confused. Yeah, that was her. She did that.
And Crow is kind of buying it, and he's kind of like, I wish that the whole world was gone except for the two of us. Like, ooh, how romantic.
Yeah.
Get a room, you two.
Yeah, hey, baby. Let the space gods empty this world and leave but you and I.
But she's picking up the call back to Olympia, so she needs to go do that. And Karkas, they thought he was dead, but now he's awake and talking to them. Says, ha ha ha, no instrument was ever made that could find honor among the deviants, ha ha ha. Yeah, I suffer from deep wounds, but I live.
Yeah, he's been listening in on the whole conversation, and now he's going to come in with his commentary.
And she's kind of figuring out that she's been seeing things incorrectly here. Saying, you think, you feel, you speak with great sensitivity. I find this amazing in one so different. And he says, thank you, my lady, for not calling me monster.
Oh, Tim, political correctness gone crazy. Why can't we call monsters monsters? This is ridiculous. In my day, we knew. Oh my God. Occasionally I have to be exposed to social media, and it just gives me brain bleed now. Some absolute warped brains out there. But yeah, this just reminded me of that.
Yet the deviants will have me slain because I was born of them, a mutate embarrassment, an outrage of their standards. And she says, is this an issue you plead? What is it that you want of me? And Crow tells her to be careful, but she's still listening to Karkas. I seek sanctuary, my lady, a place to spend my life in fruitful pursuits. Then the reject wakes up and knocks out Crow. And
have you seen that photo from, I think it's the red carpet of one of the Justice League movies, and it's Jason Momoa advancing on Henry Cavill. He's stooped, and Henry Cavill's talking to he's posing for cameras. He's upright, and he's just sort of posing, and then you can just see off camera Jason Momoa entering frame, and he's like going to jump on him. That's exactly what happens here. I think we need to meme this. We need to crop it and compare the two pictures. But yes, the reject is Jason Momoa in this scenario I'm depicting.
The reject is angry with Thena because she was there in the box too, watching him fight for his life. But she's sympathetic to him, I guess. She would like to see him, move beyond this killing machine aspect. And so she's taking both of them to Olympia. Crow thinks she's crazy for doing that, but the three of them disappear with a zvoff. Kirby does a lot of these exclamation points on sound effects, which you don't see very often.
Yeah, it's a new one. Zvoff. I haven't seen that one before.
Yeah, especially if somebody like disappears, then it's a really weird sound effect. It happens again later too. But yeah, as I'm looking through here, all the sound effects have exclamation points.
I mean, it's all suggestive of, because she's meant to be the analog for Athena and her connection to Zeus is constantly being stressed. I think it's meant to be suggestive of lightning blast, a sort of crack of lightning, and he's trying to capture that onomatopoeia, and this is what he's come up with. Zoff, zoff, but like the Z's and the F's, you can see where his brain is trying to capture that sound. This is what he came up with. It's a new one on me.
And Crow is left in the flooding chamber calling Thena, Thena. Coming up, issues 11 and 12, including the stunning way that the celestial Nezar deals with the Soviet attempt to nuke him, and the Eternals gather to form the Unimind. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon. Follow the link to Amazon from there and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting the show every week. We really appreciate your support.
Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe.
Spanning from the first issue of Who's Who in 1985 all the way through the loose leaf edition.
Including all the updates, the spin-offs, custom Who's Who pages for forgotten characters, and tons of in-depth character spotlights.
Entries span from the golden age of DC
and into the extreme 1990s.
Covering characters such as Superman by Kurt Swan and John Byrne.
The Justice League by Kevin Maguire.
Batman by Dick Giordano.
The New Titans by Tom Grummett.
Wonder Woman by George Perez.
The Legion of Superheroes by Keith Giffen.
The Flash by Carmine Infantino.
Lobo by Simon Bisley.
The All-Star Squadron by Jerry Ordway.
Firestorm by Al Milgrom.
Aquaman by Chuck Patton.
So many entries talking about Ian Karkull.
The Forever People again, and again, and again.
And hundreds of other characters found in Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe.
Available wherever you find podcasts and at fireandwaterpodcast.com.
Nuclear Man, Batman, Hawkman, 2D Man, and Hour Man.
Who are all these people, man?
They're all part of the DC Who's Who.
And next issue is The Russians Are Coming. And once again, in the next issue box, no exclamation point. In the next issue, exclamation point.
Yes.
The Russians are coming! On the cover, it gets 2 exclamation points. Cover of issue 11.
Yeah, which is, it's quite the action scene, because we have what appears to be a missile shooting towards a giant celestial.
Right,
So
the one in
this
the
is-
Soviet Union, the blue one. I forgot his name.
And we have Soviet soldiers in the bottom of the cover, all pointing, and they're all in their winter gear, and they're in a Siberian landscape, and they've got another rocket primed and ready to shoot. So this is pure Cold War. The Russians have nuclear weapons.
You would think that these guys would be running for cover if that's a nuclear missile.
Well, one of them is even like raising his fist in sort of celebration, premature celebration. I reckon they've got this giant space god on the ropes.
So the first page has Zurus with Domo calling out, "Gather Eternals." Zurus calls and bids you all to answer. Even as the humans and the deviants, we are faced with the return of the space gods.
And we have a splash page of like all of these new Eternals appearing and arriving and being gathered. And when I was reading these issues, so in effect we have 2 or 3 issues of let's get the gang together. Like, that's happening the entire time. All these other events are happening that we are dipping in and out of, but it's a meeting being called for a couple of issues where the quorum is being assembled. And it occurred to me as I was reading this, I think at the time, this is a relatively new thing. And then I remember, in particular around in DC, where you have your Crisis of Infinite Earths, and then you had, over in Marvel, you had the Infinity Gauntlet, and you had these comic book series where you'd have assemblages of heroes, and you'd have crowd shots. And George Perez was particularly known for this. This is something he would do. He would keep coming back to this idea of, each individual character has recognizable detail, and you can tell who they are. So I feel like Kirby's doing something here which is going to get done more and more and more as the years go on. And I feel it had less and less impact to the point now where, like, a lot of Marvel crossovers that I read, and I'm reading a lot of Marvel at the moment because of this series and because of just other topics we've been talking about, deconstructing comics. I'm seeing issues where they have these crowd moments. They feel flat now. Whereas I think back at this time, they were very exciting.
Yeah, it's just run of the mill now. Oh, look, 25, 50 superheroes together. Yeah, okay, I know him and him. Yeah, so again this week, like, all the superheroes are together.
I think this was a new thing, and I think I want to suggest that Kirby kicked it off. I want to suggest that. I could be wrong, but I feel as if books like The Eternals gave him the opportunity to do this, because these are not characters who have other creative teams or other editorial control saying, oh no, I'm not going to let you use Batman in that issue because I've got Batman in Mongolia doing something else in this issue at the same time. So the advantage of The Eternals is he's got this huge canvas to just create all these characters and just have these kinds of scenes. And when it's happening now with these superhero casts, it just doesn't mean as much, weirdly. Diminishing returns has set in.
I had to wonder who's doing all of this clothing designing in Olympia. They got a good business. Like, everybody's wearing a completely different costume from everyone else. Yeah, and there's different time periods sort of being touched on as well. Some look medieval, some look Greek, some look like Norse gods, but they all have a sort of techno-futuristic aspect to them as well. Also, is that Bonnie Tyler in the foreground?
Might be. Do compare and contrast.
Anyway, so yeah, everybody's arriving in Olympia, including Makari, Icarus, and Margot. And yeah, she's commenting on how it's kind of disconcerting that people just seem to pop out of nowhere. And then Kingo does so. Poff.
Poff.
Now, of course, in the movie, Kingo was from India, but in the comics, he's from Japan.
Yes.
I think the only thing that the two versions of the character have in common is that they're said to be film stars.
They like being in films, yeah, because they get to relive their ancient past by starring in this version samurai movies. So he gets to be a samurai still. He clearly liked being a samurai. So the movie sets out and do that.
Although it's interesting that he lives in Hokkaido, because at the samurai times, it wasn't really part of Japan, Hokkaido.
Really? Okay.
It was just home to the Ainu people. But I think it was after Meiji time started in 1868 that Japan took over Hokkaido. But anyway, historical accuracy aside, so Cersei has shown up, and she's dragging along that professor that she's so infatuated with, Sam Holden. So it's not quite clear to me why she's so into him. He just seems kind of nervous and bewildered all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, there's a weird charge to their scenes together. He's Hugh Granting all over the place. Oh my goodness, the fictional Hugh Grant, not the actual Hugh Grant, who doesn't seem to have any sort of trouble in that space or fields. But the on-screen Hugh Grant, who's like, oh my god, I'm so attracted to you, but I can't possibly be a bother to you. Oh no, oh gosh, how can I express my feelings? So yes, he's just uptight, wearing a tie, a suit, glasses, slick back hair, and constantly befuddled and bewildered about what's happened.
Right, and she's brought him along because they're going to do the Unimind ritual, which happens in the next issue, and she thinks it would be eye-opening for a professor of anthropology, which he is.
Yeah, and to be fair, that is of professional interest, I would assume. Anthropologist actually experienced the Unimind.
I guess so. But he doesn't even say, yeah, that sounds interesting. He's like, huh? What? What's going on?
Dragged along. Yeah. She is, he is Cary Grant and she is Katharine Hepburn, and this is Bringing Up Baby. She's just dragging him along. Oh no, I need to get back to my skeletons. I need to get back to my dinosaur skeleton. No, let's go over here. No, come meet my tiger.
And the subject of Icarus's family comes up, who are the Polar Eternals.
We'll meet some more of them shortly.
Yeah, they live in the Soviet Union, it turns out. But Cersei says Icarus is the best of those boars, his family, and I wouldn't rate him among the top 10 most popular males.
Cersei's great.
Yeah.
I really like Cersei.
Me too, yeah. And she has, coming up a little bit later, she has her best line in this set of issues. But
I find her very entertaining when Kirby's writing her. I find the version of her that I've encountered in contemporary Marvel comics, it's just usually a bunch of dudes writing her to be, she has sex with everybody. Oh, and it's like, oh, this is awful. Because I feel that like they're presenting her in a joyless way, whereas I feel this version of her is much more sort of in control of whatever she's doing, and whether that is taking an interest in a man or another Eternal or whatever. There's usually something in it for her, whereas I feel like the contemporary version of her that like, okay, Tony, you and I used to sleep together, but let's have lunch on the building we're meeting on. And I was like, why would you even say that out loud? It's just dudes who are still 10-year-olds mentally and think that's exciting. Disappointing.
So we go to those generals in the Soviet Union, and most of them are up for bombing the Celestial. Nezar is the blue one. Nezar of the Fourth Host. But there's one guy, Vulcanin, who is trying to argue for communicating with the Celestial instead of bombing him. And he doesn't seem to have any luck talking them out of shooting nuclear missiles at a Celestial. So when he loses that argument, he leaves. And it turns out that he is an Eternal. His name is his actual name is Vulcan. So Vulcanin was his like Russian cover name, I guess. And so he's got 3 associates, and they all change into their Eternals costumes rather than their Russian military costumes. Uniforms.
We're sort of straying into Slavic mythology now, which is, a little more interesting because I think you were previously complaining that you weren't seeing as many pantheons. It was Greek or Norse. So now we're straying further east. So yeah, there's some hints of that here. But we also meet Druig here, who will become a much bigger sort of antagonist within the Eternals Marvel comic universe. And then he was featured by my countryman, played by Barry Keoghan in the film. And he was one of the few actors who I felt brought something interesting to the movie. Because so many others looked a bit lost. But Barry Keoghan was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of creepy and weird. I can play that.
I don't even remember him, but it was kind of a crowded movie.
He was the one who was in South America who had mental control over all the Aztec people.
Okay.
He's the dark-haired fellow. Anyway, never mind.
Okay, so they also need to go back and join the Unimind. And so they go to Olympia in this Soviet helicopter. And they run into these guys in matching costumes who are flying around, levitating, the Delphin brothers. And there are, at least 4 of them. It's not quite clear how many of them there are. They're dressed kind of like Steve Ditko acrobats or something.
Yeah, that's a good poll. I'm reading Speedball at the moment, which is the Ditko Marvel late period Ditko Marvel book where characters just stand around speechifying about the value of art and the value of law. Jesus, Steve. Rein it in a bit. I think Roy Thomas is actually helping on the writing and is still pretty out there. But yeah, Speedball has this is exactly his look. This exact appearance. Sort of, as you say, trapeze artist with a helmet type look. Yeah.
And yeah, actually the Russian copter hits 1 or 2 of them. And so they're now like sitting on the helicopter as it lands, and they're not so happy with it. But then who is this that comes out of the copter and smacks one of them, and they end up getting into a big fist fight? Now, I guess that these guys are Icarus's polar relatives, right?
Yeah, they're all polar gods. They're all like drawing on that sort of arena. I was looking up examples of Slavic gods, but yeah, there's sort of that bleed through that's coming through here.
And then Icarus comes in and he gets involved in the fight. And this was the Cersei line I liked, because Margot says, "Cersei, can you stop this?" And she says, "They'd cry like babies." So
yeah, this is just horseplay. This is just gods.
Her sense is, they want to do this, so we shouldn't stop them. They want to get into a big fight. But then there's another zap. Okay, I guess from Vulcan, right? Who causes the twaff that happens at the bottom of that page and zaps everybody apart. "Let the lightning unleashed by Vulcan's hand be the final word here," he says.
Yeah.
So that ends the fight.
We have the lightning onomatopoeia is varied. Lots of F's.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't see F's like that so much. But yeah, all the sound effects, wham, bam, pow, they all have exclamation points. Well, I guess it's like Batman 66. I think those sound effects had exclamation points too. So they're talking about joining in the Unimind. And we go back to the other Soviet generals who are preparing to shoot this nuclear missile at the Celestial. And they do so, or at least it appears that way. And the missile the Celestial causes the missile to turn 180 degrees and move straight towards the generals.
Or does he?
And we see it on their screen getting closer and closer and closer. And it turns out it's all an illusion. The missile never even left its silo.
Yeah.
The fact that it was even shot was the Celestials' projection. And by the time it appears to have reached them, all the generals have had massive cardiac arrest.
If you die in the game, you die in real life. Yeah, no, it's it's a brutal bit but also, I mean, I was thinking about this before, like the other Celestial who descended into Lemuria and just like trashed the city and just totaled it, like just smashed it to pieces, because the Deviants are considered a threat because they are not held in check. But you just kind of smash the joint. This one sort of selectively took out this command structure from the Soviet Union with an illusion. It didn't even have to do that. It could have just walked in. But the humans are being sort of treated in a really interesting way, because we also had the SHIELD operatives who got kidnapped and detained and then were shrunk. There's this sort of, okay, we won't like enact mass destruction on you, but we'll punish you. We'll give you a spanking. It's back to the spanking again, Tim. But,
yeah, I thought this was interesting. Yeah, because I was like, are the Celestials kind or sadistic? Because they're kind to cause there not to be a nuclear missile launched, but on the other hand, it's pretty mean to make them think that the missile is moving straight towards them and freak them the heck out. And I thought this last page was especially effective reading it in guided view, because you've got one panel at a time of this missile getting closer and closer, and what's going to happen here. And of course Kirby's narration is totally over the top.
Yeah. It's
death is upon them, relentless, unstoppable death.
Is Kirby doing animation storyboarding at this time? Because it feels so filmic to me. A lot of this does.
I don't think he started doing that really till the 80s. I think he was focused on his Marvel work at this point.
But it just feels like storyboarded action. The sequence of the entrance into Lemuria, as well, as I said before, felt like a movie, felt like a camera. And this is the camera display that the Soviets have been staring at. That's what they're seeing. They're seeing this on a display, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they all die. There's something about it. It's an interesting page.
Yeah, well, I think Kirby watched a lot of movies, and I think his thinking was cinematic even before he was doing anything that had actual movement in it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody could argue that Kirby's work is not cinematic. Even in the 60s stuff. Yeah.
No, it's really, really interesting stuff. But death is upon them, relentless, unstoppable death! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! And then next panel. Of course, it is all illusion. Power of the space gods, and just a bunch of corpses in the panel. Wow, it's chilling. It is chilling stuff.
And next issue is called Unimind, and of course, the same deal with the exclamation points. None in the next issue box, but there is one in the next issue on the cover and the splash page. Yeah, the cover of issue 12. June issue, unleash this issue, Unimind, the most fantastic life form of all, plus Ajax the Eternal battles a demon from the past.
It's almost like, don't worry folks, there's gonna be fist fights in this.
Yeah, that's kind of a by the way, we should also include people getting into a fight on the cover, because just the Unimind, maybe the editor said just the Unimind is not enough to make the kids plunk down their 30 cents.
Jack, the kids don't care about Gestalt entities. Shared consciousness. It's not really a seller, Jack. Have a fucking sumo wrestler on the cover. Let's go.
Of course, now, 30 cents for a comic. I mean, who wouldn't spend that money for a comic now? when they're $5.
$5. As a callback to my discussion with Paige a few episodes ago, Tim, I have started reading Marvel's Blood Hunt event.
Oh, really?
Well, what is this bloody thing about?
Yeah, I didn't read the main series of that. Of course, I read some of the the crossovers in the books that I normally read anyway. I know the iFanboy guys thought it was one of the better events. What did you think of it?
I mean, I'm intrigued to see where it's going, but and I think McKay is an interesting writer, and I think he's got genuine affection for these characters, and he wants to do well by them. So that's helping me along. But there is an aspect to it where the sheer scale of atrocity becomes numbing. There is a point where it's like, what are we doing, folks? How do you, as a sort of creative publisher, have these stories set in this world, and then we're meant to believe once the event is over, 9 to 5 resumes and people just go back to their day jobs. And I don't know how it's not a fundamentally altered society. It just makes no sense to me. And I think that's what happens when you sort of stray into these areas.
True of a lot of the events in the Marvel universe, that they really should affect society more than they do. But
it never makes sense to me, because then when they do these sort of stories, was like, oh, here's what happens when the Sentinels take over, or here's what happens when Apocalypse takes over, or whatever. There's some sort of event. How radically altered the world is. And I feel like every other Marvel storyline should produce that. Every other event is a global scale threat, but this one in particular, you've got like an invading army of vampires attacking people in the street. It's just so bleak, and I don't know how you come back from that.
Yeah, it didn't really interest me because I just don't like vampire stories. I think the vampires are boring. But
that's the thing. Yeah, I love vampire stories, but the vampire stories only really work because they're smaller in scale. By design. It's a predator that hides in the shadows and can be urban or can be rural. It can be in the past, can be in the present day. It's applicable to many different types of stories, but it's singular. That's the point. You can, once you go into 30 Days of Night territory, where it's like entire towns are getting wiped out, you've now escalated to a point of, well, now there's going to be consequences. The vampire can't be hidden anymore. Now it's actually a known thing. And that changes the kind of story you're telling. So this is where I got a bit lost by it. Anyway, I will persist.
All right, issue 12, Unimind. And so we see on the first page a bunch of Eternals looking at something. There's
including
no
a person of color, finally.
Oh yeah, no 2-page splash here.
Yeah.
So on the second page, we see that what they're watching is Thena and the 2 Deviants materializing there, and they're all like, "What do you think you're doing, bringing these 2 bozos to Olympia?" And they think that somehow having those 2 there is going to make their situation worse with the Celestials and all that. I didn't quite follow their thinking beyond just simple racism. Yeah, they seem to have a very segregationist view.
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And as we've learned from our giant root vegetable looking friend, the Deviants also have a sort of way of segregating undesirables within their society.
Yeah, the Deviants from being Deviants. Even within the Deviants, there's a split. But
this is like Thena confronting the Eternals with their own bigotry, and I feel that's an interesting story. But yes, now they're unwelcome. They're here, and one of them is badly injured and needs help. But there's a crisis happening, and the Unimind is happening. So her timing is either opportune or not, because it's like, well, we can't really deal with this right now because we've got the Unimind situation. So I think her wards, as she called them, they've now gained access. They're in. Like, they're not going to get turfed out immediately.
But then, of course, when like all the female Eternals see the Deviant, they're like, give me a slice of that. And they're all like wiping the drool off their face practically, and Dina's telling them, well, he's just a killing machine. He hasn't learned the art of romance. But they all want to be his teacher, I think.
Yeah, no, he's their new toy boy.
Karkas collapses because his injury is still bothering him a lot. And she says, your intellect far exceeds your talents as a monster. Fear not, I shall see to your needs. So then everybody who was around turns around and leaves because of the call from Zurus to join the Unimind. So Dina's like, okay, well, I need to do that too. So, and
can I ask a question about this? Sorry, I don't want to delay this over much, but just this panel here where the women, having fawned all over the reject, all of a sudden are leaving. Athena asks why, and they say, "Oh," and one says, "Great Zurus calls." So, does Athena not hear?
Yeah, well, I thought that was why Athena went back to Olympia in the first place.
Yeah.
But now she's puzzled.
Right. So was the suggestion that she's sort of fallen outside the influence of the Unimind? I don't know. Anyway, it was just an interesting little moment there.
Yeah. So now the reject is asking her about love, and that he doesn't have any experience with it, and he's not sure what to do, or he kind of doesn't want to, and so she says, okay, your first assignment is to take care of Karkas. Yeah. While we're doing our Unimind thing, tend to his needs. That's a way of showing love, caring, that kind of thing. And he's still not having it. He says, it is blood, not tears, that one sheds in the arena. I shall not cry for Karkas. And she says, then you will learn. Guard him well. And Karkas says, hear that? Reject? Ha ha ha.
Yeah, they're like two brothers stuck together in the back of the car who hate each other.
Yeah, very much.
You gotta take care of your little brother. I don't want to. He's a jerk.
So she takes off to join the Unimind, and Karkas and Reject continue to needle each other. Mm-hmm. You got a full page panel of them. Karkas looks huge there.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it's intimate. It's both intimate and also just shows how large Karkas is again, and that's an interesting choice. There's this contrast between them, which I find it's interesting staging on this page. But once again, the reject is sort of hunched over, like he's poised. He's Wolverining before Wolverine was really known for this, I think. I'm just so angry all the time.
So then we go back to the land of the Incas, the dome that Ajax and Dr. Damien are trapped under for 50 years. And Dr. Damien is just burning the midnight oil. He's just trying to get all this research done that he wanted to do. And Ajax is like, well, we got 50 years. Well, Dr. Damien himself says, I have the next 50 years to complete my task. He doesn't seem to be worried about passing away in that time.
No, yeah.
Even though he's all bearded, he looks like he's about 60 or 70 or 80 years old. I don't think he's that old, but...
Yeah. Well, diets and society, the standard of healthcare that existed back then, he might have been 40. I also wondered about this. So again, with Ajax, does he experience the Unimind? He doesn't mention it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he can't go, I guess, because of the dome, but he doesn't even mention receiving the call.
And like, does the Unimind require them to be physically there, or could he be connected, psychically? Like, this is where we need to understand a bit.
Based on what we see in the last part of this issue, I think you would have to physically be there.
You need to physically there, yeah, because it's a sort of merging of mind and body and into this collective gestalt. So yeah, I can absolutely appreciate it. But I feel like he should have maybe mentioned, I have this pull. Something's pulling me, but I can't leave. I have to stay here, and there is an opportunity for him to have brought that up here, because it's like, we're stuck here, but I really need to go somewhere right now, but I can't.
And we see Arishem outside, leader of the fourth celestial host, and I just realized that his helmet looks like a space heater to me. One of those electric things that lights up. And at first I was thinking lighthouse, but no, I think it's a space heater that's coming to mind. And yeah, Dr. Damien at first is thinking he would like to see Arishem's real face, and then he changes his mind if he thinks about it more. His coming has already shattered our concepts of history, and as for his mission, well, I retract my previous statement. I don't think I want to see his face at all.
Because maybe he'd be smiling at the destruction of humanity. Is that the suggestion? That he'd be like, does he see if it wears a smile? And he refers to his mission and the possible destruction of humanity. He's like, is he actually having pleasure from the imminent Holocaust? Is that what that the professor is wondering? I feel that's interesting.
So then, like, Ajax is just kind of looking for entertainment, I think, and he sees on the wall there's the image of an Inca wrestler who's kind of sumo wrestler shaped.
Yeah.
With a top knot, though. And he manipulates the atoms to bring this carving to life. This actual Inca wrestler appears, like popping out of the wall to fight Ajax. And the professor is at first kind of worried for Ajax, but Ajax, as he says, had a lot of practice at this, so he has no problem handling this wrestler. And then when he's done, he can just, rearrange the atoms and make him back into a wall carving. Sfut. Is the sound
Sfut's
effect.
another good one. Put add to the list. It's sort of bread and circuses. I feel even within, because as we talked about the cover. So don't worry, kids. There's an action scene in here, and I feel it's so perfunctory that even within the comics, like, I'll bring this guy to life. I'll put him back now. I'll put my toys away. I'll put them in the box.
Professor wonders how Margot is doing, what she's doing, and so we go to Margot. And she is being levitated by Icarus as they all fly to the Unimind site. And, of course, Cersei has her boy toy, Samuel, flying also, and he's just stammering and whatever.
She refers to him as such a fine specimen.
And so, everybody's flying, and Zurus is still in his, like, kind of lighthouse type perch, and everybody flies into this sort of field, and they all disappear, and they all join together as the Unimind. It's kind of a blue flame that they're flying into, and Margot and Samuel are worried that it's going to be going to burn them, but it's not that kind of fire. And when Samuel flies into the flame, he says, "Yipes!"
But yeah, his last thing before that he says, he's screaming like, "Don't leave me, Cersei!" And like he he's terrified. Like his face, we have an extreme close up on his face. His eyes are wide. His mouth is open. He's screaming, and he says, "Don't leave me, Cersei." And then he's entering into the Unimind, and I feel as if whatever was Samuel is probably immediately eradicated in that moment, because now he's part of this force with all these Eternals. So. And we're told as well that they're the first humans to ever see this. Like no other human has ever seen this before. So it's just, it's kind of insane. It's a sequence.
Yeah. Okay. So the Unimind is formed, and it's causing this big glow that normal humans, in surrounding areas are commenting on. Somebody on a ship thinks it might just be the effect of weather conditions. And we see this big sort of, it looks sort of like someone's head if it's like all brain. It emerges from the blue flame and rises above the earth. And it's making some kind of contact with Ereshkigal as the issue ends here. And next issue, Astronauts. Although before we get to issue 13, next time we've got the annual.
Yeah.
Which doesn't look like it has anything to do with what's happening in the series.
Filler episode.
Same characters, but different situation.
Yeah. No, the sort of concepts suddenly took a huge leap forward in this set of issues. And as I said, we had 2 or 3 issues of waiting for the meeting to start. But Kirby still managed to make it interesting, and I was quite enthused by these issues. It was sort of, we're going somewhere now. This is starting to kick off.
Yeah. Before the meetings, is there coffee and donuts?
Coffee and donuts, chit-chat about the weather. How's the family? Plans for the weekend?
Right.
Sorry, you need to turn your mic on? No, you need to turn your mic on. Your mic's not on. Your mic's,
You're muted. You're muted.
You're muted. You I can hear you. Can you see me? Can you? And so on.
Right. So Ajax could have joined over Zoom.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. All right. So we'll stop it there for now. And I'm starving to death and I need to eat lunch. So thanks for joining me. And to Emmet. Thanks for joining me and Emmet. Emmet, thanks for joining me. Whatever. All of the above.
Till next time.
Till next time. The Eternals is published by Marvel. I'm reading these issues in the collection Eternals by Jack Kirby, the complete collection. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. Patrons get access to podcasts about the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man, Jim Starlin's run on Captain Marvel, and more. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Next week, a look at perpetual teenager Archie and his friends. I talk with Archie expert Jack Copley about some of the history of the comic, including the married life, as well as his favorite Archie creators and more. It's a flashback to episode 338 from November 12th, 2012. Until then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.